Close your eyes and picture a map. It's spread across a mahogany table in a London clubroom in the winter of 1915. Two men sit beside it. One is British, the other is French. They each hold a colored pencil. They are not generals. They are not soldiers. They are bureaucrats. And with a few strokes of those pencils, they are about to bankrupt an entire civilization. This is not a story about war. This is a story about a ledger, and the bill is still being paid in blood today. We think the Middle East is broken because of religion. We think it's broken because of ancient tribal hatreds. We think it's broken because of terrorism or dictatorship or oil or Islam. We are wrong. The Middle East is broken because two accountants in wool suits decided to liquidate the Ottoman Empire and auction off its parts before the corpse was even cold. They sold a dream to the Arabs and pocketed the deposit. They promised sovereignty and delivered insolvency. They drew borders that were not maps. They were invoices. Let's go back to 1914. The Ottoman Empire is dying. It has ruled the Arab world for 4 centuries. It stretches from the deserts of Yemen to the mountains of Anatolia. It controls Mecca and Medina. It controls Jerusalem. It controls Baghdad. It controls the land bridge between Europe and India. It controls the future, but it is choking on debt. The Ottomans owe money to British banks. They owe money to French banks. They owe money to German banks. The interest alone is crippling. The empire is a debtor nation wearing the costume of a superpower. When World War I begins, the Ottomans make a fatal calculation. They side with Germany. They gamble that the Central Powers will win and cancel their debts. They lose the bet. And the moment they lose, Britain and France stop pretending to be allies. They become creditors. And creditors don't liberate, they foreclose. Britain has a problem. The Suez Canal is the artery of the empire. If the Ottomans march across the Sinai and cut the canal, Britain loses India. Britain loses Australia. Britain loses the war. They need a way to destroy the Ottomans from the inside. They need a cheap proxy war. They need someone else to do the bleeding. They look at the map and they see Mecca. They see a man named Hussein bin Ali. He is old. He is proud. He is ambitious, and he is drowning in resentment against the Turkish rulers in Istanbul. The British see an opportunity. They see a man they can buy. In Cairo, a British official named Henry McMahon begins writing letters. They are not treaties. They are not contracts. They are sales brochures. He writes to Hussein and he makes a promise. He says, "If you revolt against the Turks, we will give you a kingdom." He says you will rule from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. He says you will be the king of the Arabs. He does not put it in writing with legal precision. He leaves the language vague. He leaves the borders blurry. This is not an accident. This is strategy. Vague promises cost nothing. Hussein believes him. Why wouldn't he? The British Empire is the most powerful force on earth. Surely their word is their bond. On June 10, 1916, Hussein fires a rifle into the sky above Mecca. It is the signal. The Arab revolt begins. Bedouin tribesmen pour out of the hills. They attack Turkish garrisons. They blow up railway lines. They march north believing with every step that they are marching toward freedom. They are marching toward bankruptcy. At the exact same moment, Hussein is rallying his army. 2 other men are sitting in a quiet room in London. One is named Mark Sykes. The other is named François Georges-Picot. Sykes is a British aristocrat who believes the empire has a divine right to rule the world. Picot is a French diplomat who believes Syria belongs to France by ancient covenant. They are not poets. They are not dreamers. They are liquidators. And they are carving up the Ottoman Empire like a bankrupt estate. They pull out a map. They take a ruler. They draw a line from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Everything north of the line is colored blue. France gets it. Everything south of the line is colored red. Britain gets it. They argue about details. Picot wants the coast of Syria. Sykes wants the oil fields of Mosul. They trade cities like poker chips. They trade Aleppo for Basra. They trade Damascus for Baghdad. They are not drawing borders. They are dividing revenue streams. The agreement is signed on May 16, 1916. It is classified top secret. Hussein does not know. The Arab fighters freezing in the desert do not know. A young British officer named Thomas Edward Lawrence does not know. Lawrence is in the Hijaz wearing Bedouin robes and riding camels. He is teaching the Arabs how to blow up trains. He is promising them independence. He believes the promise. He is a true believer. He is also a pawn, and the game is rigged. Let's talk about the cost. Revolutions are expensive. Armies need guns. Guns need gold. The British are financing the Arab revolt, but they are not giving charity. They are issuing loans. Every rifle costs money. Every bag of grain costs money. Every bribe to a tribal sheikh costs money. The Arabs are going into debt for their own liberation. They are taking out a mortgage on a house they do not yet own, and the bank holding the mortgage is planning to foreclose before the ink is dry. The Arabs fight brilliantly. In July 1917, they capture the port of Aqaba. It is a stunning victory. Lawrence rides across the Sinai to deliver the news to the British commander Edmund Allenby. Allenby is impressed. He gives the Arabs gold. He gives them weapons. He integrates them into his invasion of Palestine. The Arabs become the right flank of the British advance. They tie down tens of thousands of Turkish troops. They save British lives. They earn their independence. Or so they think. Lawrence begins to sense something is wrong. He hears whispers. He sees the way British officers look at the Arabs with contempt. He sees French advisors arriving in the desert acting like landlords inspecting property. He confronts his superiors. They lie to him. In his memoirs, he writes that he felt like a fraud. He writes that he was exploiting the Arabs by calling them to fight for freedom that would never be theirs. But he keeps fighting. He hopes that if the Arabs capture Damascus first, the politicians will be forced to accept reality. October 1st, 1918. The Arab army enters Damascus. The people flood the streets. They raise the flag of the revolt, black, green, white, and red. They proclaim an independent Arab government. They crown Faisal as king. It is the greatest moment in modern Arab history. It lasts 4 days. General Allenby arrives. He summons Faisal to a meeting at the Victoria Hotel. The room is cold. Allenby tells Faisal that his government will not be recognized. He tells him that Syria belongs to France. He tells him that a French officer will arrive shortly to take command. Faisal is shocked. He protests. He says his men died for the city. Allenby is unmoved. He says, "You are not sovereign. Sovereignty is solvency. And you are broke." This is the smoking gun moment. The bill has come due. The Arabs have been fighting on credit, and now the creditors are calling in the loan. The Arabs cannot pay. They have no treasury. They have no central bank. They have no foreign exchange reserves. They have nothing but a dream and a flag. Dreams do not pay debts. Faisal refuses to surrender. He returns to Damascus and declares full independence. The Syrian people back him. They draft a constitution. They build a government. They believe they can survive. They are wrong. France sends an army. The commander is General Henri Gouraud. He is a one-armed veteran with no patience for nationalist fantasies. He issues an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. The Arabs march out to meet the French at a mountain pass called Maïsalon. It is not a battle. It is a liquidation sale. The French have tanks. The French have artillery. The French have airplanes. The Arabs have rifles and courage. Courage does not stop bullets. The Arab army is annihilated in hours. The Syrian Minister of War, Yusuf al-Azma, dies leading a cavalry charge. It is heroic. It is futile. It is bankruptcy in action. July 24th, 1920. The French army marches into Damascus. They tear down the Arab flag. They raise the French tricolor. Faisal flees into exile. The independent Arab state has lasted 5 months. The dream is dead. The debt remains. But the story does not end there. The French look at Syria, and they see a problem. Arab nationalism is too strong. If they rule the country as one unit, it will constantly rebel. So they adopt a strategy as old as empire: divide and rule. They take a scalpel to the map. They carve out a state for the Alawites on the coast. They carve out a state for the Druze in the south. They separate Aleppo from Damascus. They are fragmenting the balance sheet. They are turning one asset into 5 liabilities. Then they create Lebanon. They take the Christian heartland of Mount Lebanon and they expand it. They add the coastal cities of Tripoli and Sidon and Tyre. They add the Bekaa Valley. These areas are full of Muslims. Suddenly the Christians are barely 50% of the population. To manage this, the French invent a sectarian political system. The president must be Christian. The prime minister must be Sunni. The speaker must be Shia. It looks like balance. It is a time bomb. 50 years later, Lebanon will explode into a 15-year civil war. The bill for French map-making will be paid in Lebanese blood. Meanwhile, the British are struggling with Iraq. If Syria was sliced apart, Iraq was glued together. The British took 3 Ottoman provinces that had nothing in common and stitched them into one country. Mosul in the north was Kurdish. Baghdad in the center was Sunni. Basra in the south was Shia. The only thing they agreed on was that they hated the British. In 1920, Iraq erupted in revolt. It was a full-scale war of independence. The British were caught off guard. They had 100,000 troops in the country, but they were losing control. The cost was skyrocketing. Winston Churchill was the colonial secretary. He needed a cheap solution. He found 2. First, he decided to rule Iraq from the air. This was the birth of air policing. The Royal Air Force built bases in the desert. When a tribe rebelled, the British did not send soldiers. They sent biplanes. They dropped bombs on mud villages. It was brutal. It was effective. It was cheap. The ledger balanced. Second, Churchill needed a puppet king. He could not rule Iraq directly. It was too expensive. He needed a local face. He remembered Faisal. Faisal had just been kicked out of Syria. He was unemployed. He was desperate. He was perfect. Churchill decided to simply move Faisal from Syria to Iraq. It was like transferring a bankrupt CEO from one failing company to another. Faisal had never been to Iraq. He did not speak the local dialect. He was a Sunni foreigner imported to rule a Shia majority. The British staged a coronation. They rigged a referendum. They claimed 96% of Iraqis voted for Faisal. It was theater. Faisal arrived in Baghdad wearing a crown he did not earn, ruling a country he did not know. He was trapped. If he worked with the British, his people called him a traitor. If he opposed the British, they threatened to remove him. He was a king on a leash, and the leash was made of debt. Iraq owed money to Britain for the cost of the occupation. Iraq owed money for the Air Force bases. Iraq owed money for the salaries of British advisors. The country was born insolvent. Then the oil came in. In 1927, at a place called Baba Gurgur near Kirkuk, a massive well erupted. It was a gusher. Suddenly, Iraq was sitting on an ocean of black gold. The British moved fast. They forced the Iraqi government to sign agreements handing the oil rights to Western companies. British Petroleum, Shell, the French. The Iraqis got a tiny royalty, a few shillings per ton. The vast wealth of the nation was siphoned off to London and Paris and New York. This was not trade. It was extraction. It was theft. This pattern repeated across the region. The British and French set up governments designed to be weak. They backed minorities to rule majorities. They favored tribal leaders over urban intellectuals. They crushed labor unions. They crushed nationalist parties. They made sure that no strong independent state could ever emerge. Why? Because strong states negotiate, weak states obey, and obeying states are profitable. Let's talk about Palestine. On the Sykes-Picot map, Palestine was colored brown. It was labeled International Administration. It was a vague compromise because nobody wanted to solve the problem. The British took control in 1920. They had made 2 contradictory promises. In the McMahon letters, they promised the Arabs independence, including Palestine. In the Balfour Declaration of 1917, they promised the Jews a national home in Palestine. The British spent 30 years trying to balance these promises. They failed. They allowed Jewish immigration, which caused Arab riots. Then they restricted immigration, which caused Jewish riots. They satisfied no one. By 1948, the British were exhausted. They were bankrupt from World War II. They could not afford to keep troops in Palestine. So they did what empires do when the cost exceeds the profit. They walked away. They packed their bags and left. They left two peoples fighting over one land. The war that began in 1948 is still being fought today. Every rocket, every checkpoint, every funeral, every demolished house. They are all interest payments on the debt of Sykes-Picot. Now let's zoom out. Let's see the generational cost. The mandates officially ended in the 1940s. Syria became independent in 1946. Iraq became independent in 1932. Lebanon became independent in 1943. But independence is not sovereignty. Sovereignty is solvency. And these countries were still broke. They were still trapped in the economic structures built by the British and French. The oil was still controlled by Western companies. The currencies were still pegged to the pound and the franc. The borders were still the borders drawn by Sykes and Picot. A new generation grew up. They were not tribal sheikhs. They were army officers. They were lawyers. They were teachers. They looked at the map and they felt humiliated. They looked at the puppet kings and they felt rage. They looked at the oil pipelines carrying their wealth away and they felt robbed. So they revolted, not against the Ottomans, against the post-Ottoman order. In Iraq, the army staged a coup in 1958. They dragged the king into the palace courtyard and shot him. They dragged the crown prince's body through the streets of Baghdad. It was a blood sacrifice to erase the shame of Sykes-Picot. But what came after was not freedom. It was dictatorship. Saddam Hussein rose to power in the 1970s. He was obsessed with erasing the colonial map. When he invaded Kuwait in 1990, he said Kuwait was an artificial state created by the British to cut Iraq off from the sea. He was right. But his solution was more violence, more debt, more bankruptcy. In Syria, the French finally left in 1946 after they literally shelled the Syrian parliament. But the divisions they created remained. The country rocked from coup to coup. Finally, the Ba'ath Party seized power. They preached Arab unity. But in reality, the regime became dominated by the Alawites, the minority sect the French had empowered in the 1920s. The Assad family built a police state to hold the fractured country together. They used fear to paper over the cracks in the map. Lebanon descended into civil war in 1975. It was a 15-year nightmare. Christian militias fought Muslim militias. Syrian troops invaded. Israeli troops invaded. The economy collapsed. The currency collapsed. Beirut, the Paris of the East, became a city of rubble. Why? Because the sectarian system designed by the French in 1920 finally exploded. The bill came due. Let's talk numbers. How much did this cost? It is impossible to calculate. How do you measure the cost of 5 generations of instability? How do you measure the cost of wars that never end? But we can try. The Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s cost over $1 trillion. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 cost $3 trillion. The Syrian civil war has cost over $400 billion. These are not separate conflicts. They are compound interest on the original debt. And the human cost. Over 1 million dead in Iraq since 2003. Over 500,000 dead in Syria since 2011. Millions of refugees scattered across the world. Entire cities erased. Entire generations traumatized. This is not ancient history. This is the present. This is the invoice from 1916.